Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. And this week's episode is called From the Front Line to the Bottom Line, Building Food and Beverage Cultures That Care. And I'm here to chat with my friend, Lindsay Martin-Bilbrey, who I've known, I don't know how long that I've known you now, but
I know I was thinking about that a couple of days. I was like, how long have we known each other? Probably in a way that would just date us both.
Totally. But one of the things in describing what she does is that I really thought you were a marketer, right? And then a year ago, you're like, yeah, no, I'm doing catering. I'm working with a Hyatt and I have a restaurant. And I'm like, so she has gone from the front line, done marketing and managed the bottom line. She's a former executive chef. She's a marketing guru. She's owned a multi-concept hospitality group. So we're going to talk today how all of those roles that she's played and continues to play can help build a food and beverage cultures that care. So hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I am good. One of my questions that I ask everybody prior to coming on the show is what safety, sustainability, and inclusive food and beverage experiences are. And you said it comes down to care and connection. So what does that look like in practice when you're trying to design a team, leading a team and designing a food and beverage event?
I think it's something that we were talking about before we started recording. The team has to feel the team that is preparing the meal, the team that is delivering the meal, the team that is cultivating and curating the experience that the meal is happening in. The fabric of that culture has to be so much that they have a human connection to the people that they're feeding. It's a very personal thing when you prepare someone's food. Right. And that to me is always, it's one of the greatest acts of service and hospitality that we can have, and to serve those with intention and to think about what that is. And so being thoughtful enough to think about who is joining me at my table today, whether my table has 20,000 people in a convention center buffet or, 20 people sitting down in a highly VIP lifestyle engagement. And that to me, you should know everything about those people because you've been provided that information when they register or when they're brought to your attention saying they'll be joining us tonight. And I'm reminded of that scene in The Bear where one of the chefs is going in and she's checking off all of the details they know about the families that are joining with them to dine that night, what they like, the pace of the meal, not just the allergies, right? That's table stakes, but the style of service that they like, the style of environment that they're looking for. Those aspects speak so much to care, and it speaks to the testament of the type of team that would prepare that kind of environment and allow that experience to unfold at a table. And that to me is a truly vibrant and effective F&B culture, because it's no longer just about, does this person have a peanut allergy, right? It's like, how are we showing them from our house to yours what it means to be a guest in our home?
Well, and just jumping on that show, because to me, it has so many parallels to what we need to be doing, right? I mean, it is about what we do. It's food and beverage wise, but Will's story that he brings in with cousin and going to get that pizza because cousin is just walking by that table and overhears it and then runs however many blocks down the road to get a pizza and then presents it that little bit of care from a server walking by, or what if it's the busboy that's walking by, right? Or the bartender, right? Overhears that, and that care comes through that in that fashion. Yeah.
And that empowerment, right? Like the fact that the busboy or a server or somebody who's just not necessarily the human that's dedicated to serving that table, someone in the chain goes, this is a thing we can and should do. It's like the Ritz-Carlton where they give them $2,000, $5,000 to go and they're just empowered. Like there's no gut checks. You don't got to go ask leadership. You can just go and surprise and delight. And that's phenomenal. And I don't know, we micromanage so many elements that shouldn't be micromanaged. And then the ones that do need to be a little bit more care and attention to, we overlook either from a training perspective or from a delivery perspective. And I feel like it's not that we don't have the tools available to us. It's sometimes the way that we're delivering the work with the tools that we already have in our toolkit that we lose sight of, again, our goal of what we're doing when we're delivering that experience.
Yeah, one of the events that I attended a couple of years ago, I left and I came back and I'm like, and it was, and the servers all spoke Spanish. Um, and then another event, they spoke Burmese. And I'm like, can we not give our servers the tools to do their job? Right. And because I pulled out my Google Translate on my phone and typed in what I needed in Spanish on there. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. Yes, we can do that. Why aren't we helping them? Because they're the front facing people to our attendees, to our guests. Why aren't we helping them do their job to the best of their ability with translation tools or something else, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times I see this, and this is not to call out any particular
Oh,
venue,
no.
right?
Yeah.
But it's it's
Mm-hmm.
a, it's a common application, especially when you're presenting food at scale or in a
Mm-hmm.
high volume time. At a couple of the resorts I've worked with, the staff is largely visa. And so the
Mm-hmm.
J1 or H2Bs, they're coming in, especially J1 inside the United States, they're brought in to train. Like that's what the visa is. It's an educational visa to help them grow in this service area that they're coming in. Or, with some of the training programs that the hotels and the resorts put out, they're internships.
Mm-hmm.
And we treat them in some instances, we being the royal we, as labor that knows just enough. And so we're like here in this management position with just enough guardrails to succeed. But if we're delivering, whether it's high end luxury or not, if we're delivering the most exceptional experience, it's like, what does that onboarding and training experience look like? Not even just allowing them those translation assets, but
Mm-hmm.
giving them the full picture of here's the expectations on the guest perspective, and here's how you go further, and here's how you do it in your voice. And our voice as the entity that you're working for, so that you can truly learn that
Mm-hmm.
multicultural approach and take that back to your home country or get further embedded inside our country here in the United States, because it's definitely different types of service
Mm-hmm.
if you're in Hong Kong versus Nashville. I mean, it's night and day. And why shouldn't we allow them to understand those cultural nuances,
Mm-hmm.
no matter which side of the table you're serving on?
Yeah, because and when we travel, we see those nuances, and we're like, because there's so many people that go to Europe and say, "Oh my God, I could like the allergen labeling there is so great," and they come back
Oh,
here and we're
yeah.
like, what are we doing? Um, why don't we have this, right? Um, okay, so I'm editing all of my IMAX videos that I did, and I asked you a question on Smart Monday about what is something
Long ago, it's
smart.
like, how did I
I
answer
know.
it?
No, and it was about offering true variety of vegan and vegetarian dishes
Oh,
beyond
yeah.
just carrots. So, what are some creative ways as the chef, but then also as the
Yeah.
meeting planner, if you can put those hats on, what are some creative and culturally inspired ways planners and chefs can rethink plant forward menus?
So I think in a lot of ways, I mean, what I did when I was first trying to do it, like the Humane Society is what got me started on this. We had a Humane Society group join us at one of the hotels I was working with, and they were completely 100% vegan in a place where we had 16, 17 outlets, and there were very rarely any vegetarian dishes. And so I went and I looked, honestly, Michelin, just because they publish all of the different styles, like they're between them and the top 50 restaurants. It was
Mm-hmm.
really great to see other chefs and their perspectives. And I loved how Chef Daniel Hum from 11 Madison Park put
Mm-hmm.
it. And even though they've recently changed their long time vegetarian vegan menu only, he was like, we didn't want to unintentionally keep people out. And so I was like, how could we take ingredients that are already there and regionally sourced and really thinking about the culture of the resort itself and what we were doing and then mimic those? So using plantains in an unusual way, thinking about chickpeas, thinking about tofu, which is always the go-to, right? But I think there's
Mm-hmm.
so many options, collard greens, the variety of vegetables that you have available to you, and building a a more standardized meat friendly omnivore menu and going, okay, so what if I took this component out and then started substituting it with this? And so it's really starting with your building blocks of the starch or the item that was really going to be the main feature, and then going around to it, like lion mushrooms, like those are my lion's head mushrooms are my favorite, right? It's got this thick, meaty, and it's really a centerpiece. And in Europe, many times they tend to use it as the focal point, just like you would a Bella or portobello mushroom. And so, but it doesn't have as many of the flavors, and it's just unique on the plate, right?
Yes.
And so thinking about that and really worrying about the presentation, the composition of the plate comes out. And then, going in and gut checking it against some of the other options. There's one, I think it's in Seven Swans. It's in Germany somewhere, Frankfurt, Berlin. He would just go out into the garden. This is what I love about that chef. He would go out into the garden and he would just pull whatever the fresh vegetables were that were ripe that day. And without any dressing or anything, would just put them on the plate. And it would be part of the tasting experience. That would be the amuse-bouche. And it was such an interesting approach to how we typically see a Michelin dining experience in the United States, because it's highly stylized, right? And so there was a lot of very stark feedback around there. But, my suggestion to meeting planners is to work with the different chefs in your team, like not just the banquet department, but go, and if there's restaurants inside of the hotel, adjacent to the property, around the convention center, build your collaborative team and start sparking some ideas of, like, if you were serving a vegan or a vegetarian audience, what does that look like? What tastes good? What is seasonally grown, regionally favorable here that would really pop on the plate? And then making sure that the staff that's going to be doing the cooking itself really understands that approach, because it's the same way to cook a lot of the vegetables that you would normally cook with. It's just taking it and making sure you're using the right oils so it's not overwhelming them, the right soy-based alternatives so it's not drowning them in butter. You're allowing the food's flavor to really come up and be part of the palate, rather than something that's just set on the side and you're like, oh, here's a salad. Because that drives me crazy. I'm like, here's a salad. And I was like, that's the best we could do here. You have all of this and it's a salad. My brothers and sisters in Christ, come on now. So,
well, and it's so true. And because Jesse State's story years ago is like, yeah, I got a carrot on my plate, right? And we can do so much better. And there's a chef online that I've been following, Chef Vey. I'm going to Vojek Vey, Vegh. And what I love that he's been doing lately, and I think this came from a conversation, one of his posts, but he's saying, here's one food in 15 different ways. Like he did garlic leather and garlic chips and garlic powder and whatever. But I think it was on one of those posts, but somebody was using the stem of the cauliflower and put it in slices to make it as a scallop, to look like a scallop. I'm like, that's mind blowing, right? And he's like, that's got so much flavor and nutrients in it that why aren't we using that, or the leaves of the cauliflower? So instead of just looking at the cauliflower itself.
Yeah, there's so much color and texture. That's, one of people are always like, if I'm becoming a vegan or a vegetarian, I'm losing the richness of the meat. And I'm like, you're really not, because there's so much flavor and vibrancy, especially if you catch it in the right season. Nordic cooking in particular, the way that they use everything but meat, because of the way that you can't fish when it's iced over, and you can't over hunt in certain areas. It's been so interesting to watch how they use juniper berries and olives and different elements of it, pine needles, that just give those textures and tastes that you wouldn't have necessarily thought to put on the plate, but necessity, is a wonderful master when you let him help you guide. So I like that curiosity around opening up a different point of view, because does it need to look what a meat plate looks like? No, because you're serving a different audience and you're caring about what they're going to look for and they're excited by. And you've automatically helped them get excited, because you're no longer just going, and here's a salad. Like you're not limiting their culinary adventures.
Right. And that's super
important. Really good screenshot.
It froze there for a second, but okay. So I love that, because we need to get outside of the normal, here's steamed broccoli and cauliflower, right? When we go to, okay. So I want to jump to a little bit of sustainability on this as well. And one thing that I like that you told me, you said sustainability is also not burning people out. Sustainability is about the planet, but it's also about not burning people out. How can event professionals and the culinary teams build systems that support people just as much as they support the planet? Because and there's a lot of talk, and coming from IMAX, there's a lot of talk about mental stress around being an event planner. And there was a comment that I posted on somebody on LinkedIn the other day about the cost of losing a chef. Like, how much did that text message cost you because the chef just quit, right? And my comment was like, where's the mentality? How do you put the value on the mental stress that now that other chef and the rest of the team has because that person quit? So can you give some suggestions on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to me when I move back and forth between my culinary hat and my event planner hat, because event planners, we are martyrs for the cause, right? We will work ridiculous hours, but it's only like the most stressful times for us are right before the event. Like there's that 2 month push before it. As a culinary professional, it's nonstop. Service happens whether you are sick, whether you are not. And if one person shows up, especially with the way budgets have been, there was a point in time with one of the restaurants I was managing, we were coming into high season, but our visa workers weren't there yet. And it was difficult to recruit in the area. And so I was working at one point in time, 6 to 7 days a week for 10 to 12-hour shifts minimum, because I would come in midday and come in. And I would try to take the bulk of that off of my team, but like my supervisors, the sous chefs I was working with, we were pulling in a lot of it. And without a break, your brain starts to break. And I am literally, you look up workaholic in the dictionary, I'm almost positive my headshot's there. But it was so interesting to me what my brain felt like once I finally did get that break. And so I think that for us, it's a training and succession planning. How are we building our teams up so that our line staff can be a leadership voice if one of the chefs needs a break, if one of the supervisors needs a break? How can you use the culture of collaborability inside your resort if you've got more than one, venue? Or outlet that's operating? How can you pull, even though it's different styles of cooking in some instances, you've got that different approach so that you're layering your bench rather than relying on the same 3 or 4 people. And again, going back to our original conversation, how are we connecting people to the work, but also pouring into the people so that if we ask them to give 150%, they also know that in an instance, will give 150% back. We cannot reasonably ask someone to work every single holiday. Like last year, I worked Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, my anniversary, my birthday, 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, you name it, I was there. I was cooking, I was expoing, I was leading, we were managing. And that places such a burden on your family life that, there's almost an institution of guilt because you don't want to ask off, but then my daughter's like, but it's my birthday. And so that for me is, I think, a valuable conversation for us to be having, that inside the hospitality framework, the ecosystem extends further than just this one role or that role, because we do it to everyone who works inside hospitality, because that's usually the better time to book those event patterns, or it's a really good time to have people fly in and fly out. And what are we asking from the service professionals that we wouldn't ask of ourselves? Like, would you trade seats with them? And if you wouldn't trade seats with them, I need you to examine pretty closely what the trade-off is going to be and how we're going to incentivize them to continue to stay in this, because Lord knows it's not for the money at all, right? And it's like, you do the work because you're drawn to the work. You feel a passion for the work. And if I can't find the motivation or the internal piece that pushes me towards that, like if I'm so disconnected from the work because of burnout, I'm going to make mistakes and care less about how I'm managing the kitchen
Right.
and what kind of ingredients I'm using, what kind of presentation I'm allowing to have happen. And that's going to seep down to my team and vice versa, because they're compensated even less
Yeah.
than me. And in some instances, taken more advantage of because they're not as highly ranked as you might be. And so I think it's an interesting circular conversation for our leadership in the front offices to really think about
Yeah.
of who are we asking to deliver these experiences? How are we supporting them when we're doing that? And are we allowing this to be a sustainable experience so that the larger mission of what we're trying to accomplish with our venue, our resort, our restaurant, our airplane,
Right.
whatever, is really being realized?
Well, and I love all of that you said, and it's in some respects interesting too. When you go to some hotels or some convention centers, that front of house staff, the banquet servers, some of them have been in their job for 30 years, right?
Yeah, it's
And it
amazing.
is. And I was at the Baltimore Convention Center a couple of months ago, and even though the food service management company changed, from Aramark to Levy to Sodexo, whichever one it is, right? The team that's doing the work, the groundwork, they've been there for 30 years, right?
Yep.
But the management team has changed. So we need to figure out, they love their jobs apparently, right?
Or
And
they love the security of their
the
jobs,
jobs,
because
right?
sometimes
True.
that's what's keeping them there. But it is I 1000% believe it. It is culture. It is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely culture. You stay, and the people you work with. There are some people there. There are a couple of hotels that I work with where it's the same four people that run everything, or they may not have the title of leader, but they run everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going anywhere. This is where their children are. This is where their
Mm-hmm.
parents are. But the culture that they have and that they, every day live out loud, it just washes over every experience that they put on. And
Mm-hmm.
whether you're standing on the kitchen line or you're standing at the hotel desk to check in for registration, you should feel that in a way where they're not so overwhelmed or upset that they're there, because you can only hide it to a certain point when you've just
Exactly.
had it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when you're carrying that tray of food, the
Yeah.
10 top. Yeah, exactly. Okay, on a little bit of switch of sustainability, let's talk food and beverage sustainability. You shared a story with me
Yeah.
about oysters. And
Yes.
and I really liked the connection because it was a powerful example of the gap between intention and execution. So can you tell everybody about that story, and then how can we, when we're thinking not just sustainability but even dietary needs, right? And like, there was a post on LinkedIn the other day that this woman looked at a menu and they had a vegan icon but they had no vegan options, right? So
Yeah.
again, that same gap. So can you tell us about that oyster story and where that gap is?
So oysters play an interesting role
Mm-hmm.
inside just the food and beverage
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem, which I love them because oysters were actually one of the cheapest foods you could ever have, right? In the beginning, the history of the oyster was they were the leftovers inside the day's catch. And so they would sell them kind of back a house to people like the more wealthy humans to try and get them to have a little bit more cachet. But also from an actual ecosystem perspective, they're the cleaners of the ocean. There's actually an experiment that's going on right now where they're planting oyster beds in the Hudson River
Mm-hmm.
so that it's going to become clean enough for us to be able to process water out of it and drink it, to swim in, which I don't know if you've seen the Hudson recently right outside of New York. I don't know that I would swim in it quite yet, but they've, I think they're on year 1 or year 2 of the experiment, and they're starting to see really early successes. One of the resorts I work with does an oyster tasting experience. And as part of that experience, we bring in oysters from Prince Edward Island, Maine, Massachusetts, Gulf oysters, which are where I'm from, these great big giant fish, which are terrible raw, but absolutely delightful, fried, down up and down the coast of the East Coast of the United States and the West Coast of the United States. And it's a really good look at the different styles of oysters, how global
Mm-hmm.
warming has affected how they're growing, the fact that some beds, many of them actually are seeded now, like where people are
Mm-hmm.
actually planting oysters and growing them. The size, you can have some in PEI are, about the size of a little bit more than a dollar, like a $half. And then the ones that come from the Gulf are the size of a man's fist. Like it's a very different, like how the waters come over and groom the oyster and the meat that's developed inside. And it's a very popular experience with our guests. People love learning about the history. There's a wine tasting element, so you can figure out how the salinity and briny of the flavor of the champagne of the oyster, flows together with your preferred alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage. And so it's a lot of fun, and it tells the history of that particular resort's area, which is in the low country part of the United States. And it's really great because you get people all around the world. We've had people as far as South America, New Zealand join us, as well as people who are coming in right there from the area up and down the coast of the United States. And so you love seeing that. The flip side of this is that at this particular resort, there's 16 outlets, food outlets. It's a tremendous amount of green and brown food waste. In a couple of the restaurants, we go through boxes of lettuce, tomatoes, bread, ends and things that you just don't use in the actual plating of the plate. But then where does it go? And oysters themselves, the shells are extremely good for the environment. You can take them, crunch them back in. From a composting perspective, it's an exceptional array of goodness and nutrients to help continue the growth of literally the farm to table. And so when I saw that and I first got there, I was like, why don't we have a composting program? We're spouting all of the benefits of the oyster, even if we chose to only compost the oysters and not the rest of the food waste, despite the fact of the enormity that we've got rolling here. How can we take that? And I prepared a full presentation. I did it as part of like my quarterly check-in for my leadership inside the organization. And it was just like, it went nowhere. And I was like, well, I could go and run a pilot program at one of the restaurants, which is smaller in scale, and I'll work with the local ordinances to help make sure that we're having pickup. And they were like, it kept beating these barriers. And finally, I went to the executive chef on the property and I was like, why are we coming into such a stonewall here? And he's like, it's just a lot of effort. And if the pilot program succeeds, then I'll have to start putting it into the rest of the outlets. And he goes, when you think about the amount of composting that we could do, they would have to have, in addition to the enormous amount of just trash that we go away, we would have to change the way that we're compartmentalizing and segmenting out waste, from the cardboard to the produce to making sure meat and cheeses and seafood and all of this is set up. He goes, and then we'd have to find a way to haul it off. He goes, I don't know if the credits would be worth it. And it was such a stark moment for me, especially because I had just come from IMEX, right? I'm sitting here listening to all of it. And when I owned my restaurant, that was a huge part of our story was composting. Like we had a compost outside, guests could see it. Did it smell the best at all times? No, but we made it part of the education around, we were in Texas at the time. Like, this is where your meat and cheese can go. This is where everything else is being used. And this is how, when you work with the local farmers, this comes back in for our gardens and for our output so that we can limit the impact that we're having on it. Because if you're truly living a farm to table mentality in the way that you're growing, presenting, sourcing, it is more expensive sometimes, and it is not the easiest to do. And it is always going to be effort, always.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's effort to grow the enormous quantity of food that it takes to feed the world in a non-Jose Andres kind of way. And so it's like every little bit towards helping that counts, right? It's we're taking it and it's going to balance the scales. And if one person does it, two more can do it too. And so somebody has to be the use case somewhere. And it was still remains one of the great disappointments in working with that resort, because I never was able to get a program up and off. But I've got the framework built, so I'm knocking on people's doors. I'm coming for you, because I just think that it's something where you should walk your talk.
Yeah.
Right. If we're going to talk about the way that oysters impact the ecosystem, we can talk about how you personally can impact the ecosystem through your small boutique hotel to your large franchise multi-outlet resort.
Well, and I like that he or she, the chef pointed out to you, the different things that you have to think about. But at the same time, when I talk about sustainability and food allergies or whatever, I'm like, that means you need to change your systems. And figuring out, and sometimes depending on where you are, that city or that state or that county doesn't have the systems in place for you to be able to do that. So it's not necessarily just that property. And so I want to give them quote a little bit of an out, right?
No. Yeah, and that was, because before I presented the program, because like Tracy, you have exactly I do your research. Anybody who's looking at a program where you're looking to implement this in, you should always start with what is the regulatory body that's going to have to do this. And yes, that means digging into the trash and compacting, because like they should have it. In some places it's easier, like Portland, Oregon. Right. It's right there, written for you, really nice and easy. Portland, Maine, I'm calling you out just because I was sending flowers that way earlier. Like it's definitely, it might be a little bit more hidden, but somebody somewhere is having a conversation about it. And you might have to pick up the phone and talk to them, but you should make sure that you have all of the stakeholders in a list somewhere before you start it, because it is a team effort. It is not a solo effort by any stretch of imagination.
Oh yeah, no. And it does take a lot of rethinking how we've done things. Right. And just listening to you talk too about it, and, the amount of other waste that we have from events too. And just thinking through some buffets I've done this year and last year, I'm like, can we not cut that many tomatoes up? We don't need that many tomatoes. Or, we're overproducing our food in a variety of different ways to make that buffet look really pretty. But can we just serve it in smaller bowls and put, so there's a lot of more rethinking to do as well on that.
Yeah. And in that, because again, like my meeting platter hat pops up right there. And I'm like, but from a presentation perspective, food is such a visual, attraction in the way that it's presented, in the way that it smells. And like a really great table is going to attract and bring you in like a magnet. And if we start, what I'm going to hear them say, if we start compromising on that look and feel, like what is that? And so I think it's been really interesting to watch the different applications around the many different outlets, because you travel as much as I do. Like you get to see so many different perspectives in how people display what they want you to eat. Right. And sometimes it is extremely well done. And sometimes you're like, okay, I mean, we can definitely use that. I don't know that that's actually a fork. But it is sustainable. It is compostable. Let's definitely do it. Because I think there has to be a line, given the experience that you're putting out. But I do think that as a whole, we as an industry could do a better job in articulating what we're looking for, because we have to have more options for different budget points. Because that's always been a sticker for me as an event planner, is like, I want this, but I can't afford that because I have to have this. And this remains a nice to have on many budget lines. And for many of my clients that I work with, versus some of the things that we have to have and we have to pay for, especially as costs continue to increase worldwide with the tariffs and everything. Right,
exactly. There's one, we were most recently at an event last month, and the fruit bowl, and it was beautifully displayed, but it had mint around the whole inside of it. And I'm like, okay, all that mint's getting thrown away. I love the presentation, but all of that mint is now trashed, because people touched it, getting their food out, right? And so,
and cross-contamination. You can't put it on there because someone's got a cantaloupe allergy or something like that. Like you can't reuse it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so I'm jumping to a completely different kind of headline or thing here. You've worked in the kitchens and you've worked in the boardrooms. How has that dual, you kind of talked about it a little bit, that dual experience shaped the way that you approach hospitality and leadership today?
It's interesting is when I first started in my career a billion years ago, I was going to work in-house and I was just going to plan live events. And, that was such a good testing ground to understand all of the interconnected ways, but not necessarily have oversight over them. But my husband, he's former defense. So we moved 10 times in the first 12 years of my marriage. So basically every 12 to 18 months, I had to go and present myself to a whole new city and culture and be like, by the way, I'd really love for you to hire me. I can also do this. And so, I was extremely lucky in college that though my degree is actually in political science, but for fun, I took classes in the hospitality school. I worked at Taylor's, which is the fine dining restaurant, was there. And because I'd grown up in events as kind of like that was my after school job, I had experience into it. And with every new location I was at with our moves, I was able to just kind of add it into it. Now, I was lucky very early on also to have the privilege of becoming more of a technologist and a marketing expert, because this was back when email was really transforming, community sites, event technology. I was the youngest person in the room, to which they were like, you could definitely do this. And so I learned trial by fire, though it wasn't necessarily what I was trained to do, versus kind of the more culinary and like the more static parts of event planning, which is the menu, the programming. And so I was able to kind of mold them together, which when I did my strength finders, one of my coaches used to say, she goes, it's kind of like you have schizophrenia, because I'm strategy and then I'm analytical. And she goes, you just basically reshuffle the deck until you find what you need. And she goes, less than 2% of all people have this. And she goes, you just keep turning it around until you find the lens that fits. And when people ask me questions, that's what I do. It's like basically the computer can't compute until I find at least two viewpoints, because I'm always looking at it from the high level. If I had to pay for it as the CEO, if it was my event or I was advising the board of directors, and then that person working the kitchen line going, do you know how hard it is to find Texas toast in Saudi Arabia? I mean, we can do it, but let's think about logistics and airfare at this point in time. And so a lot of it is a learned experience. It's definitely nurture rather than nature, but it is really a flexibility that I wouldn't give up at all. And it's one I'm grateful for. And I can't choose one side or the other. I have tried to just be one thing, and I failed. And so I just kept doing this. And then I've gotten, I know when to ask for help. When I reach that point of where my expertise lies, I'm very good at going, okay, and who else needs to be on the Tiger team? We need to call Tracy. We need to call Liz. We need to call Leanne, right? Like building those people out, because at the end of the day, that is what you should be doing. Even if you're a true expert in your field, hospitality, live events, this is a team sport. It takes a number of viewpoints and opinions to do it. And you should always gut check it, because people at their core, we're selfish. Like we're going to do it at what looks cool for us. And sometimes through no fault of our own, we can lack the self-awareness in a way that's going to make the care and the connection really flow through, because you wouldn't do it like that. Right. And that's what gets in the way of this. And what I found my superpower is, because of this jellyfish mentality where I just kind of float here and there as the current takes me, I'm able to go, okay, we need one more voice, because I hear what you're saying. However, I really feel like these German speakers who are joining us at this English event need something, because their first language is German. And even if we just have it as a, interpretation over that content, that full day of content you're offering to them, the labeling system for their foods, because it's, if we're serving an English breakfast, the Germans don't eat like that. Let's make sure they understand why we're putting tomatoes in the hash. Like that type of cultural connection builds a bridge and allows us to help them get where they need to be. And it's difficult when we're laser focused on accomplishing the checklist item we need to do to get to the next one.
Well, and like, this is the breakfast that we're going to serve, or this is the only lunch we're going to serve, without thinking through who, you said it earlier in the show, it's like, know who your audience is, know who you're feeding across the board. And going back, touching on the thing that you said is that events take a lot of people, right? And produce, and we'll take the meeting planner side out, but put that convention center hotel side on there too. Like all those departments, we think that as a planner, we put here's our event specs, right? And we submit them to the convention catering services manager. And we don't realize all the different departments in the back of the house that have to make that work. Yeah. And how do we, from a revs ops and real operations standpoint, but also how do we also align the front of the house and the back of the house? And because some of those silos are stubborn, and I can say that from
Such a
personal
graceful way to
experience.
say
But
it.
personally, like I've said this on my show numerous times. Like chefs have said, I cook, I don't label. And front of the house is like, well, I don't cook, so how do I know what's in the food? How do
Yeah.
we make that? How do we bring that culture together, as well to impact the revenue opportunities? Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And this is something culinary professionals as a whole, the lack of ego, we aren't lacking for ego, right? I mean, every TV show that portrays a chef that's totally 1000% how they are. In fact, they're hiding it from you a little bit. They're worse than that in some ways. And I love it. And it's what makes them so good, because they have many times, even though they probably suffer from imposter syndrome, the confidence to try what's risky and try what you're not necessarily going to see coming. And that's what I love about chefs as a group, as an entity. But that same thing can get in the way, because the way that we train culinary professionals is to be like, you do this and you do this exceptionally well. I worked with a chef de cuisine one time where they were like, I don't want a sous chef or a line cook who has a magic. I want someone who's going to follow a recipe, because this is the vision, this is the execution, this is what has to happen in order for it to come alive on the plate that we want to have. And it was such an interesting perspective, because I think in many ways is very similar. This is what the BEO says. This is what the room set needs to look like. This is what the tablescape needs to look like. The forks need to go exactly this way because we're setting for this protocol, and there can be no deviation. And what I've found to be successful in really bringing that front of house and back of house approach together is, especially if you have a lot of egos, is like pair them at the top, right? As much as we can to get it where it's like to like, and then disseminating that information down and really helping them see both the benefits to working together as well as the consequences of not working together. Because there are quite a few consequences, and they're out there all over the internet in so many ways. And the great news is you have a lot of use cases for when this fails, right? I mean, even Threads, which is it's a baby social media at this point. There's so many examples. And people do better with consequences than they do necessarily with benefits, unless you can tie revenue to it. And the difficulty is the money that you're making from the dinner or the F&B at a live event is not readily money that's going to be coming directly to the culinary team or the front of house, right? They see it, but they see it in different, less direct ways. So consequences is a good starting point. As the event professional, when you're coming in, make part of your site visit or one of the latter parts of your pre-planning visits of, I want to talk to these people. Right? Who is my banquet captain? Who is my chef or my acting supervisor that's going to be helping make this happen? Who's responsible for this? Because I want to know who you are. If you, as the event professional, take that accountability on and then follow up with both praise or complaints that says, Tracy and Jose knocked this out of the park. We told them that we were looking for this type of menu and this type of dining experience, and it was like lockstep. From the moment this happened, and that really comes in because you're recognizing the people that are powering what's happening, and that goes a lot further. And they are obsessed internally, from convention centers down to independent boutique hotels. They are obsessed with feedback. They are obsessed with how it comes in through your trip reviews online. They have many systems that outline words that are negative and positive. If you don't think they're paying attention to that feedback, we're not paying enough attention, right? Like it's something where that sounds harsh, but in a big way, it's a responsibility of the event professional who's leading the charge for F&B to lasso the team and then keep the team accountable. And yes, it's one more thing the event professional has to do. But if you're really wanting this, the change is not going to necessarily come within the convention center or the hotel. Not for a lack of trying for some of the culinary or front of house professionals, but because until it becomes so noticeable for the front of house, to have that be a check mark where you're not going to come back to that venue, they're going to go where they're going to keep coming back. Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the sad part about it, is like, unless you go, okay, but I won't.
Right.
And I'm going to go tell my friends and I'm going to use your name when I do it.
Yeah.
You know? And it's, I hate that. I hate that about us as an industry. And I want to get to a point where we're not there, but 20 years in, we're still there. So use those relationships, build those relationships, but be sure to praise just as loudly as you provide feedback.
Well, and I think, I had a conversation with a client that I'm speaking to at their event in a couple of weeks, and in the room will be sales teams and from venues as well as destinations, as well as the planners who are sourcing the venues for them and contracting them, and then the executioner, the planners who execute, and they all have a different role in that. And I think just from what you said is like, they all have a piece in that destinations or that venues execution of that, and having even that person that's negotiating the contract saying, we need to talk to them, the chef, and we need to talk to the food and beverage director before we sign this contract, because we need to know how it's going to be executed. And even for a destination, I'm like, I don't know how many, and I'm saying this literally naive. I'm like, I don't know how many destination salespeople ask, well, what are the dietary needs of your group, right? Before you pitch them to a venue, or understanding, hey, do you have a lot of people who are coming in that follow Jain or kosher or halal? I mean, this is what we have to offer in our town, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a huge opportunity.
In some of the tier 1 destinations and your more actual luxury oriented properties, that's table stakes, right? We sell that way in order to do it. And in many other destinations, and this has been an interesting trend as the micro event trend has grown, we're asking destinations who haven't necessarily had that caliber of audience come to their destination. Typically, they've been chosen because they're smaller, which means in some ways there's some cost savings built in or some concessions that will help offset whatever the cost is. And, with those, there's more training that has to be done. We're not mind readers. If you look at it on the venue side, the amount of RFPs and the amount of site visits that don't go anywhere, like the longevity of those conversations, you're expected to keep information from a site visit that happened in 2022 and they're just now coming to see you in 2026, right? And yes, we keep notes, but this is where part of that team aspect, like your CSM is only as powerful as the information that you arm them with. Because the CSM then comes in, and that's who is going to tell the army of professionals that work inside the destination and the venue and the outlet to actually put your vision into action. And so unless you're a long-time repeat event, coming armed with as much information beforehand, be that person who brings notes and leave behinds and all of the things, just like the destinations are like, here's our capacity chart and the 3,200 things that make us cool. Like, you should have the same set of things about you. I love people who come in with like, here's my list of my weird quirks about my audience. Here's the stuff that we hate. Here's the stuff that we love. Here's the stuff that someone else has done with us before. It's like, this. You've been working with these people for more than 3 months as an event professional. You know the quirky stuff. So like, don't be shy about it. So many times we feel like we have to hide our crazy. I'm like, my people, you work in live events. We assume you have it. And I would rather be forewarned and prepared than have it drop into my lap on a Friday morning after the fish guy had already come. Like, I can't do anything at this point.
Yeah. Exactly.
So help me help you, and do it more than 2 weeks before the BEO meeting. Because then we've got ways to really make this something that's going to change your event rather than something where it could have been incremental. And the venues don't want to lose your business. They're not going to tell you no. They're going to tell you yes as much as they can, and within a budget that you can get as close as we can. And so there has to be a meeting in the middle of us working together as partners, because this is, again, a team sport. So if
Mm-hmm.
we find that way, it's not just melding front of house and back of house, right? It's melding different parts of the ecosystem and being like, this is what it takes for this ecosystem to thrive versus the biosphere fall down and
Right.
die.
Right. So much to unpack, so many things that go into events and managing food and beverage. I love the perspective. I love the fact that you have that the back of the house and the front of the house and the planner perspective to it, because it adds so much depth to what you do. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. This has been
You're
fun.
welcome. All right. I have a few rapid fire questions for you.
Go for it.
What's one kitchen tool you can't live without?
So I was thinking about this and I kept laughing to myself because I was like, is a towel a kitchen tool? I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
like for me, honestly, it's probably either a towel or deli containers where you can put different liquids in them. I mean, I can do anything with a deli container and a towel. Everything else is ingredients and you can always source those. It's such a weird answer.
No, it's very interesting. Okay. I like that. Okay. Favorite global cuisine to draw inspiration from?
Oh, I tend to cook Asian. I love Asian food just
Mhm.
because it is such a wide diaspora. Like there's so many things you can come into. And I love the way that it colors, especially the United States. You can find different instances of it. So probably Asian cuisine
Okay.
is my favorite to draw inspiration from. And then close after that is African. I love
Okay.
especially South African.
Yep. Yummy. They're great food. What's your go-to comfort food after a big event?
Pho, see, Asian cuisine. I do love, like, I eat Vietnamese pho all around the
Uh,
world. It's like when I get in, I find one. There's actually one around the corner from the Berlin Marriott near the zoo that, like,
oh,
longtime favorite. I've been going
in
there for
DC?
years.
Oh, in Berlin?
In Berlin, Germany.
Oh, okay.
There's stuff. No, when I'm in DC, I go to Old Town Alexandria because it has one of the only places I can find decent Afghan food here in the States. So
Okay.
I always go there. For the most part, I get
Interesting.
outside of the Metroplex and head to Old Town.
Okay. Well, I thought you were talking about the DC Zoo, because there's one that my nieces take me to that's got some good pho. So
Oh,
yeah.
I'll have to check that out if
Yeah,
I'm ever in the Northeast. Yeah, or Northwest.
exactly. Yes, Northwest DC. Okay. If you could design a dream dining experience for event pros, what would be on the menu?
Um, I would like both a sweet and salty amuse-bouche because I like different aspects. And I'm not a person who likes sweets. So I would start with something that's a really easy palate cleanser, something that has, you know, 3 or 4 elements to it. So the appetizer, if we want to run a traditional tasting menu, right? I like the omakase approach, where if we're
Mhm.
coming in, we're going to have different bite-sized elements, and then you can
Mhm.
expand on it. So something that has a plant-based alternative, and then an omnivore, so you have choices. And then I don't like heavy entrees, and so really thinking tapas style in those small bite size, the tapas that allows you to sample the regional cuisines of the location you're in. Every city you visit, I joke that I've been to Chicago 1,500 times, but I've never actually been to Chicago. But I've sampled the food of Chicago in a variety of ways because of the menus that are coming in. So I want that menu to have just that killer amuse-bouche that really sets the palate. And then each one of the dining experiences that come next on the menu is a tapas that represents something inside of it that's also shareable, so that you're causing conversations and connections to happen across the table, whether it's good or bad about what you like about the food. And then something with dark chocolate at the end of it, because I think dark chocolate and espresso is the way to end every event, maybe with some champagne.
Yeah. I'll do the chocolate, but without the espresso, because I don't like coffee. But yes.
Yeah, well, I was
Yeah.
going to say,
Yeah.
you don't have to have it. Like, I think that that's one of
Yes.
the things that we don't necessarily do a great job with tasting
Mhm.
menus is we come in and then we like make it like it ends with a whimper rather than a bang. And so if you're
Yeah.
going to spend all this time thinking about the starting gun and like
Mhm.
leading up to it, there has to be something where the crescendo has to end on. And so like I would like, something for me that pops. That's the coffee, the bubbles, the chocolate. For a lot of people, again, that's knowing your audience. I run around with so many people, like for some reason, all of my friends have food allergies, probably because of the event I work in. And so like we have very specific eating things you have to have. I think the only straight line for all of you is it is a rooftop bar. If it's a rooftop bar or there's water nearby or swings, we're good.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, final question. Finish the sentence. Every meal should
connect us.
I love that. It's simple. That's what it should do.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
All right, Lindsay, tell everybody how they can find you, hire you, work with you, talk to you. Yes.
Yeah, you can find me online. I'm not as active on LinkedIn as I used to be, but I occasionally post videos, but I always post stories on Lindsay the CMP on Instagram and Threads. I'm active on LinkedIn. So Lindsay Martin-Bilbrey, I'm the only one there, I promise. Or you can email me at lindsay@niftymethod.com. Find me at niftymethod.com.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am. Yay. And I need to get
Thank
on the
you.
car and drive south to see you since you're close.
Yes, come.
Yes,
We'll go and
will.
we'll figure it out and we'll go have oysters. It'll be great.
Okay, that would be awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you being here for Eating at a Meeting. Another episode is awesome that we had. I will be back here. Well, actually, I'll be in Florida next week. So coming to you from Florida, but same time, same bat channel. So until then, stay safe and eat well.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.